Hi, welcome to the Soulfire Inspiration Podcast. My name is Webby, and I'm glad to have you on the other end listening in. My goal here is to encourage you through music and conversation so that you're inspired to live intentionally and purposefully. I certainly do hope you're keeping one foot in front of the other. We're dealing through unprecedented change in our world, in our families, in our communities, in our different spaces, and I like the way a very wise person put it. We may all be on the same ocean, to speak figuratively. We may all be on the same ocean, but we're definitely not in the same boat. We're all dealing through our present circumstances very differently. For some, this has been an easy time to make changes, reinvent, pick up a new rhythm, and just jump right on in. But for some, not so much. Change is that thing that you really struggle with because you hate change. I mean, you are very comfortable with the way things were before, and now things have changed, and it's just completely unideal, to put it nicely. You might have some choice words for it, but it's no one's fault, so you can't vent your anger at anyone else. Anyway, for some, they may also be dealing with an unprecedented realities on top of the challenges we're dealing with right now. So it could be the loss of a loved one, it could be the loss of your business or income, it could be the loss of a relationship, or it could just be general difficulties in varied spaces of your life. Whatever the situation is, wherever you are on the spectrum of things, my one encouragement to all of us today is, at the end of the day, God is still on the throne. He still sees the beginning and the end, and He also understands how things are connected in between, which is where the story of the adventure of our lives happens. And that's what I like to call it. I like to call it an adventure because you're never going to see far more than the steps you're taking in your present moment. The only steps you can see are the ones you reflect on in hindsight. Yeah. And so wherever you are, whatever it is you're going through, please know that if you're still here, then God's not done. And the one thing that would be helpful is to adjust your attitude to understand that I think happiness and joy is partly an inside job, and it's also partly a focus. And as long as you've got that and you've got something to keep encouraging you, then I think you're on the winning trajectory, And I have to keep reminding myself that, and I'm sharing that with you so that you're not alone. Life moves forward. It's life and time, they consistently move forward, and they're never really going to go back. A day gone is a day gone. You're never going to get that back. And so it's like the show that never ends. Life is the show that never ends. And I think that the person who gets the most out of it is the one who learns to deal through the ups and the downs and the in-betweens and the unprecedented situations, the unforeseen circumstances, and so on and so forth. And that kind of brings us to the point where I tell you, about this conversation that I've been having with us, the Soulfire community, this month of July. And I called it The Things to Leave Behind in a New Season. Now, life is kind of like the weather, like I've said before in a different episode. And that's just an analogy to give us a mental picture to see that everything that we experience, everything that we go through is not permanent. It'll change at some point. In the first part of this conversation, I talked about leaving behind an old mindset, which is generally just the way you think, your attitudes, your perceptions, and so on and so forth. And, whenever you're faced with a turn in the tide, your life has a different canvas, or things are in a different place, you're in a different disposition. The way you thought in your last disposition may not necessarily work for the current space that you're in. And that's what I'm calling a new season. By the way, a new season can be a good one. It can also be a difficult one. If you're in a season where, things are good, you're entering a place of rest, everything is kind of free flowing. And I'm using that term very, very cautiously here, just really for the sake of creating a picture in your mind. Then you definitely can't operate the way you operated in the time of hard work and sacrificing hours, perhaps sacrificing sleep, and perhaps any other sacrifice that you had to make. But if you're entering into a season where perhaps you need to be planting, you need to be, sowing some seeds, and I'm using that very figuratively. If you're in a season where you need to reorient yourself, reorient the way you do things, restructure things here and there, then you definitely can't operate like as if you've just entered a season of rest, because that'll be completely out of order, to put it that way. And you're definitely going to have to adjust. Otherwise, you're going to misappropriate the season that you're in. The focus of today's reflection is one of the things that you need to leave behind. This is the second thing that we're focusing on, is the old pattern. And so a pattern is generally the way you've done or how you do things, whether that's because of how you were raised or, values that you picked up along the way, your genetic makeup, whatever the reason is, or whatever it is that that kind of is the foundation or the building blocks of what makes you who you are. Every single person world over has a pattern, has a way of doing things. The thing that I love about our humanity, and I guess from my experience, is that rather my experience of just getting to know myself and learning how I'm adjusting to different seasons of life, looking at how I've lived, especially when I look at the recent seasons of my life, is that patterns can change. I love that patterns can change. You can drop an old habit, you can pick up a new one. You can drop a bad habit, you can pick up a good one. You can change the way you do things to suit where you are or to align you to where you want to go or to be. And that's a wonderful thing, because it means that no human being is static. Even if we many times feel like as if we're going through life and we're stuck in one place, we really aren't. It's more of a mental state that makes us believe that we are stuck when we really aren't. It's just that perhaps maybe we've got fears we need to deal with, we've got things we need to release ourselves from or release from our lives. But no human being is static. I love the way Scripture puts it and tries to bring this home. And it says this in Matthew chapter 9, verse 17. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the old skins would burst from the pressure, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine is stored in new wineskins so that both are preserved. Now, of course, in the world where this scripture was written, wine was put in wineskins, but in our world today, we put wine in bottles and casks, I believe. Anyway, you get the idea. The analogy really is just to help you understand that you cannot try to fit squares where there are triangles. You can't try to force old ways of thinking to work for new spaces of existence or function. I think some of the classic examples of change and old patterns or old structures that do have to change is when you look at the work environment. In many business organizations, people had to be physically present in a building to work or to be counted as having put in for a productive day. But now, when this whole pandemic became a reality, many people were forced to work from home. And so where you were working in an inflexible environment before, now flexibility became a necessity, and people couldn't go to their offices to go work from there. And so now the interesting thing to notice is that it's kind of never going back to the place where people have to be forced to be in a specific place to be able to work effectively, because now we've all had to adapt and to learn new ways of still being able to produce, to be able to, to make our hours count for something and to be able to earn our checks, And so the environment that we live in, the way we work, the way we do things has definitely significantly changed. And that's wonderful, because it allows us to grow and to stretch and to adapt and to pick up new things, and perhaps even to reinvent or to invent where perhaps things were on a usual line, a flat line, so to speak. And so, the whole point of everything that I wanted to say today is, whatever the season is that you're getting into of your life, you're definitely going to need to make some adjustments in how you do things, because the way you did things before may not necessarily work for where you are now. Of course, you need to give yourself the space and the room, the space to grow, because you're not going to be able to master this in one day or in 1 hour or in 1 month of beating your body about it. No, I think the one thing that all humanity is at the same level on is that there's no one who's perfect and there's no one who perfectly does anything. It's all about progression. It's all about growing one step, one bit at a time. But the point is that you've got to consistently be growing, and I think that's the thing that we end up measuring in hindsight as success. Success is really being able to stay consistently growing or consistent at anything. It's not just about the starting or the trophy. It's really more about the in-between. And I definitely do hope that you will stay committed to your process of growth. And when you do hold your trophy, do understand that you're beginning a new season, and so you need to repeat the same. You need to repeat the same habit of being consistent. Of course, change the way you do things, but be consistent at your change and your process of growth through change. I look forward to continuing this conversation on the next episode. I'm glad you've listened to this point. If you haven't subscribed and you've just joined in, perhaps for the first time, please do consider subscribing wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast. If you'd like to follow me on all my social media platforms, the links are wherever it is you're listening to this. And I look forward to connecting you in some way. If you'd like to send me your thoughts, your comments, your questions, please send me an email on podcast@Soulfire Inspiration, or just send me a message. If you're listening to this on Anchor, there's a message button somewhere there. Just click that, holler at me, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. In the meantime, be safe and be love. Catch you on the next one.